All right, welcome back to the Treasure Fix podcast. We have an exciting episode today. We have a solved word search, right, Nels?
We do, yes, and 3 winners all here with us, which is super cool and exciting, and we're very appreciative of them taking a little bit of time to just sort of do a little post-op on the Billy Joel word search treasure hunt, which is been solved.
That's exciting.
Yeah, so welcome to Jeremy, Sean, and Stacy. Again, appreciate you coming on. And we just wanted to do this to sort of get the other side of this particular treasure hunting experience, because it was certainly incredibly entertaining for us to follow along with, but we were in the dark as to some of the behind the scenes stuff. So that's sort of what we wanted to go into. And we think a lot of other people who were participating in this hunt and otherwise would also be interested in hearing a little bit about it. So let's just start with a softball. But Jeremy, to whatever extent you feel like discussing, and I'm going to ask each of you, what's your past treasure hunting experience?
I've been hunting for about 3 years now. I really got into it with the Incredible Hunt, and I just really like the collaboration with teams and working together and throwing out all different ideas to solve different hunts and puzzles.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds good. Sean, how about you?
Yeah, I've been super into the treasure hunts for the past maybe like 3 or 4 years. I co-created the Xavier Marks treasure hunt a few years ago, and that one's still active. So I've seen it kind of from both sides, but there's something about working with a good team that really makes it a fun experience to work on.
Very good, for sure. And Stacy, let's go to you now.
I think I'm the newest member. I've only been doing this probably, I want to say 2 years now. But have always enjoyed puzzles, have always enjoyed kind of like the more traditional side of things. So when I found this, it kind of took that, but turned it on its head and gave something new and exciting and creative to do with it. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
Cool. So how did the 3 of you decide to team up? And was that specific to this hunt only, or are you guys working on other hunts together?
One of you want to take that? So we've worked on a whole bunch of different ones, and I think we've had different teams for different hunts and different group sizes and things like that. I think when we first saw this one, we thought we'd try it out just kind of in a small group and see what your puzzles were like, because you see a new creator and you don't really know, are they going to make good puzzles? Are these things going to be fun? Are we going to take a quick glance at this and think, well, it's not for me, this is not kind of up our alley or whatever? So
Sure.
yeah.
Cool.
What aspect of this puzzle really struck your fancy when you were looking at it? Like what kind of puzzles typically do you mostly enjoy?
I enjoy all kinds. I think it's kind of fun to have something that's just a one pager, because on the surface you think, oh, it's a word search. I know what to do with a word search, right? Like there's some kind of traditional rules or kind of traditional puzzle there. But that at some point you're probably going to cross something that has a difference in it, right? Like you're expecting to encounter something that's maybe leftover letters, maybe there's something else going on. Is there some sort of theme? There's no rules. Do you need to use 3-letter words? Like what kind of twists are you going to put into it? So it's kind of fun to experience that.
Yeah. Sean, did you guys decide to team up prior to this hunt, or was it sort of after you all had gotten a feel for it to some extent?
So we've worked on a lot of different hunts together, like Stacy said, with sometimes with other team members as well. And so for this one, before it even started, we're just kind of like, well, let's look at it together. So we decided right from the get-go just to try to see what it was, see if it was even something we'd be interested in. Because a lot of times we'll pick up a hunt and maybe just we won't connect with it or whatever. And I always say there's different hunts for different people out there. So if we don't connect with it, we just move on to a different one. But with this one, um, we like both of your offerings as well as Americana as well, which is still going on. Um, so yeah, we just decided to dive into it, and then from there, once you find a clue, then you're in, right? Once you get sucked in and you get one thing going, and then you find the next thing. The next thing is like, oh, you can't stop now. You have to see it all the way to the finish line.
Sure, yeah. Do you all feel like you have particular strengths and maybe to some extent weaknesses that as a team you all find you complement each other and work well together in that way? Jeremy, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of my weaknesses would be the organization, and I feel like Stacy's really great at putting all of our ideas together so that we can look back on that and in a structured format. And Sean is really great at throwing out some crazy ideas and some really logical ideas, and we need them all. We
Yeah,
need all the ideas.
sure. And so I'm gonna go to Stacy on this one since it sounds like she's the organizational kind of backbone of the team. So tell me a little bit about what your process was like for solving this puzzle, or what your progression looked like, if answering it in that way makes more sense.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm lucky. I think in spreadsheet format, so that's where the organizational skills come in handy. Yeah, I think we first noticed a bunch of the terms that were in the search, a bunch of the names. Okay, we've got a song going on. We first that started falling apart relatively quickly, and then you realize you're probably dealing with leftover letters or phrases. That was pretty quick as well. Um, Pretty early on, I think we had commented on a bit of a flavor text. Like you see something like, and this time every letter counts. And you think, well, okay, how many different ways can you count something? What does time mean? I think very early we had thought about the possibility of the one-time pad, and we thought, what could be our ciphertext? Like in this, we don't have some sort of like clear ciphertext. Like sometimes you'll be presented with a phrase or something that looks very obviously like ciphertext, and in this case we weren't. But I mean, that's kind of half the fun with a one-time pad is, the whole word search could have been the ciphertext, right?
Hmm.
Like you could have translated anything into something that meant something. So I think we had tossed out the ideas about that fairly early, even though we didn't quite know where we were going. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up the one-time pad because that was certainly a point of discussion, and in large part that was the one of the primary purposes of this puzzle, beyond just kind of being a get to know you sort of thing, was to introduce a functional use of the one-time pad so that our community can become a little more comfortable with it in the future. And maybe mission accomplished. Maybe some people are only more confused now about how we used it in particular. But I'm curious. So and another element of this question, which Stacy, I'll let you just kind of like tag along on, and then if Sean or Jeremy have any further thoughts, they can. But I'm also curious. So you did mention that it was something that you had sort of considered early on, and I'm wondering if you felt like there were any points where you sort of wavered on whether it was actually meant to be a part of it, or whether you felt pretty confident that in the end you were going to be using it somehow.
Yes to all of that. I think
Yeah.
there's until you have it solved, I think you have to put all the ideas on the table,
Yeah.
and whether or not you have a good idea or not doesn't necessarily mean it's the right idea, right? So you kind of gotta we had a good suspicion that it could be at play, and so we were keeping our eyes out for what that might look like, and we were trying to find something that looked like a 5-digit code, sort of to confirm that. So I think by the end, once we had the 3 names, and we had the number that showed up on the one-time pad, that was the 5-digit number, then we were like, we think we've got the right path now.
Yeah, yeah. Jeremy, when did the 3 names, speaking of the 3 names, so we had sort of the, well, reverse aliases, you could say. So we had 3 scrambled names of the actual names of people who are mentioned in the song, but not how they're mentioned in the song. When did that realization come to you, and sort of how did that take shape?
Well, tried using different anagram solvers online, and we really weren't getting anywhere with those. And we just, but we were persistent, just kept on trying. Uh, and it was the roof half skipped that was the first one to fall, to get Doris Kappelhoff out of that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so once we got that one, we realized, okay, well, that's Doris Day's actual birth name, and Doris Day's in the song. And so, well, what can we do with these other 2 phrases? Could they possibly also be names? And so we kind of worked on those, and then those fell right away. Montini
Yeah.
and Marciago.
Yeah. And here we have a Pope selection process happening, right? As Pope Paul was kind of an integral part of this puzzle. So that was obviously a unintended coincidence. But so Sean, I'm curious if you, well, all right. So tell me, who was sort of what was there a one-time pad go-to person out of the group who was kind of dealing with that, or were you all sort of familiar with it and using it and messing around with it?
I think we were all somewhat familiar with the idea of a one-time pad, but I think all of what we thought traditional one-time pad wasn't necessarily the rules that you were going to follow. So even though I think we all sort of had that rudimentary understanding, it was trying to figure out, well, if you guys are interpreting it different than us, there could still be like 100 different ways it could be interpreted, right?
Sure.
And I know even, we see on like Discord and stuff, people discussing like, oh, maybe it's going to be a Playfair, maybe it's going to be all sorts of things like that versus like a Visionaire or something like that. So we're going, okay, do we need to also get a clue to the type of cipher that's needed?
Mm-hmm.
And so we used a lot of what you were saying, right? And it was nice that you were kind of giving us some feedback about how you wanted it to be easy. And so you're giving us that feedback about how it's supposed to be easy on like the Discord publicly for everyone. And ultimately that was, what helped us get it was seeing you give it that example at the end.
Okay. Right.
Because we had that number before that for quite a while.
Yeah. And I'm actually curious because obviously a lot of that one-time pad is randomly generated, and it was lost on me that 92225 was also somehow in there. Did that throw you at all?
Yeah, it was not lost on us. We definitely found both of them right away.
Okay.
And the second number, though, being amongst other numbers, just opened up even more possibilities, right? Because how could numbers work for a one-time pad versus letters?
Right.
It could have been quite different.
Yeah.
So we were leaning toward using the one with the letters, which did end up being the correct one anyway.
Right.
But yeah, we were playing with the odds a little bit. We're like, all right, if there's 5,000 numbers in the pad, there's like a 3% chance of any random number being there. Could this be a coincidence? And ultimately, of course, one of them was a coincidence and the other was correct.
Yeah. So who actually did the translation that led you to Michael Jackson and his particular brand of cola allegiance back in the 80s?
That was Jeremy that got it.
Jeremy's the one that hit. Jeremy, tell me a little bit about that. Was that, did that feel like a total aha, this is the solve type moment for you, or was there a thought of, well, maybe this is just leading to yet another step?
Leading up to that, it was, we solving the other two longer anagrams. We have the misfit blurb truncates. Stacy solved that but unscramble it first, and we weren't sure if, could that be, but first
unscramble it, right? Yeah.
and and then the other one was the cipher is always right, and so that's what led us to that right column to use that one.
Yeah, and of course that was our intent, and yet, there was a little bit of wordplay involved there, where you read it as the cipher is always correct, maybe, but also we were intending you to then point yourself to the right-hand side of the puzzle. And then from that point, yeah, go on.
Yeah, I didn't really expect it to be an English phrase that would be deciphering. So I guess my first trial was the column next to it that was more gibberish. But that didn't really work out. And but yeah, I was really trying to use Visionaire, one-time pad type solvers on it, and just wasn't making any headway with that until he kind of gave us that idea about, there's other ways that it can be used. And
I think one thing that was sort of interesting about how this played out was that I released the clue, and then within, I think it was like an hour and a half, you all had solved it. And I think a lot of people were thinking, oh, it was because they confirmed that the one-time pad was being used. I have knowledge that the rest of the community doesn't, that I know you all were already using the one-time pad, and it was more the understanding of the particular application as people were asking on the Discord about showing examples or how might it be used, that sort of brought it home, not necessarily the clue itself, but I just thought that was, I was not expecting a solve necessarily within like an hour, but I think since you all were already kind of just knocking on the door right on the finish line anyway, it makes sense that it was just that discussion that followed that sort of brought it all home. Stacy, because I believe it was you who actually submitted it in the end, what was your level of confidence in the solve as you kind of clicked it in that time?
Oh, high. Yeah, for sure.
You felt like that was the end and that you guys had reached the final solve.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point we had a pretty good idea of how it would play out, how we thought it should play out, or how you had designed it. And you try using the one-time pad in so many different other ways, and it gives you absolutely nothing, right?
So
by the time you get something and that's kind of the beauty of getting a cipher to decipher, is you get something and you've got that part right. So we were pretty confident, I'd say.
And really the irony of all this is that I was trying to make the use in this case of the one-time pad, and again, I'm kind of speaking in terms of how my own brain works, as simple and straightforward as possible, because obviously, like with a Visionaire cipher, you have more tools online to plug that in, but I was not as certain maybe how many people are familiar with that cipher, or whether that's kind of, when you say like, what are the common ciphers, I think you might get a lot of different answers from people for like, oh, that's kind of like the basic cipher that works this way, or that's kind of the basic one that works this way. People have different levels of comfort, familiarity with them. And that's why this sort of just letter shift in my mind, where you're kind of just shifting forward, makes logical sense in a way, but I can also understand on the flip side that it's maybe not necessarily a mechanism that people are super familiar with or comfortable with. And as our Discord friend Retro pointed out, you almost have to, if you're using an online decoder, you almost have to like flip everything on its head to get it to work, which to me is sort of an unintended benefit of our system, that it sort of like makes the sort of the tools that now are at people's disposal not obsolete, but maybe a little bit tougher to use, and it's a little bit more of a manual solve. But I am just kind of curious about your totally honest and unfiltered feedback, because we want to hear it. So Sean, I'll just open it up to you first. If you have thoughts about sort of how we used the one-time pad in this case, and how that sort of stacks up against your your expectations, or your sort of feelings generally about like sort of how how we used it here.
Sure. Yeah, I think you used it in a totally fair way. It just wasn't necessarily intuitive for us at the time.
Sure.
If like you're going to be using the same method to encrypt stuff in the future, I think it's not going to be hard for anyone, right? Like anybody can follow a simple set of rules. Um, if all of a sudden you're going to switch it up and it is going to be a play fair, or it's going to be something else crazy in the future, then that will be harder for us to see coming. For either that's good or that's bad, right? I feel like for it to be a good puzzle, there do need to be clues as to what um, the mechanism is, like how we should go about it.
Right.
So, like if you were to use a play fair, like sometimes you'll see people use a play fair and they'll use the word play in their text or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, at least
Yeah.
there's like a little bit of a sign of what to do. But yeah, if you guys just like use the same method in the future, I think that everyone can follow the directions pretty simply.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, as of now, sort of the format of the one-time pad lends itself to multiple possible uses, as it seems you all are frustratingly aware of, having gone through many possible iterations of how it might be used. And that's sort of the point, that we could potentially use it in other ways. And if it is a particular cipher, I'll put it this way, if some of the puzzle's difficulty or hints or clues lies in determining the right cipher to use, that would be part of the puzzle. You can expect that in sort of similar to how you mentioned the with the Playfair, and how with the I feel like it's the Pigpen cipher maybe has sort of particular ones, and then et cetera, et cetera. But no, that's all interesting to hear about, just to get your feedback on, because again, in my mind, this was sort of a kind of straightforward conversion that honestly it's almost like a reverse Visionaire in application, kind of. I say that probably caveating that there's some either reverse this or reverse that, or encrypt this or decrypt that. And that's one of my things that I always felt like was pretty difficult when you're sort of looking at it through the lens of the online decoders. You kind of need to know enough to know where to put what and in what format. And I guess I didn't want the outcome to be necessarily just based on that sort of, I'd call it almost randomness in a way, but I don't know if that makes sense. But anyway,
Would you so you would I think part of the confusion, or part of the thing that I like, is there's a lot of uncertainty when you're solving puzzles, but then there's just some things that you kind of get told, or that are the rules, or kind of the parameters. And I think we kind of got hung up at the start of what the definition of a one-time pad was.
yeah,
And so if for the future, if we know that this is kind of the way that you guys use a one-time pad and this to you is a one-time pad, that's fine.
Yeah.
That makes things more straightforward. But if it's not, like if you're going to change the methodology that you use or the Cipher type even, but still use the one-time pad as like a keyword sort of thing, I think that would be good to know that that's a possibility. And I
Yeah.
don't think it gives
Yeah.
too much away, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, it's possible that you could, have to go and find your keyword here, but then how long is your keyword? Like the keywords could be huge.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think we've learned a lot too the in the use of it. And I mean, honestly, the word search solution will probably be a link on the one-time pad. That might make sense just so people have a particular example to go off of. And again, I mean, I think that in the future, I certainly wouldn't discount necessarily a puzzle referencing the one-time pad in that you're meant to know that you're maybe going to be using it, and there might even be, let's say, a clue towards a Visionaire cipher, and in that case, you'd sort of have those two pieces of information to go by, where you're trying to get yourself into the one-time pad, and then you're looking for a key to be used in a Visionaire type cipher. So yeah, I think that it's been enlightening to sort of see how everyone was interacting with it, because as I've said on the Discord, the difficulty in this particular puzzle was more lying in finding the names, decrypting the other anagrams, and sort of understanding how to put that all together to reach the sort of final riddle, which wasn't meant to be super difficult either. As when you were left with King of Pop's cola choice. So, definitely a learning experience on our side of it as well, that I think we can use for other puzzles. And again, that was largely the purpose of sort of these smaller ones, is to, it's sort of a get to know us, but it's also an us sort of get to know where we can be a little bit more clear with all that. So, yeah, again, I mean, even this discussion here is super instructive. So, just kind of real quick, if we can just kind of go 1, 2, 3, Jeremy, Sean, Stacy, any last thoughts about the experience overall, kind of what you enjoyed, maybe what most frustrated you, just kind of anything that you want to add at this point.
For me, I thought it was overall very, very clever, and something that you wouldn't normally expect. And so that kind of made it fun. That, okay, this isn't something that you can just plug in and solve right away. You had to do some manual solve on this. Like for that last piece, really, I was counting letters on my fingers to get KING out of that final solve.
Yeah.
And so, and that was really, really thrilling to be able to solve something like that. So
Yeah, Jeremy, let me ask you this, because since you were the one that actually did the input on that, at what was it, King? Did you realize you were onto something
yes,
after the KING? Yeah, okay.
KING.
So at that point, you kind of had the excitement sort of ramping up, like, all right, I'm
This
I'm
has got to be
finding
right.
it.
And,
Yeah.
just finish it. Yep.
Yeah, cool. All right, Sean, let's any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I just really like the kind of like concise nature of it. And I also like, that your other puzzle too. So you can kind of see like the different types of things that you do now. For me, the word search, I guess, maybe was more appealing just because it was every piece of information was used, right? And everything was
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
So when we found something, we knew, okay, that has to be something, right? Like when you found Doris Kappelhoff, we're like, okay, that has to be right.
Right.
Versus like on the other puzzle, we found like, oh, that that's that the color of chili oil is a Pantone color, but we go, it probably doesn't matter like the other stuff,
Yeah.
and we moved right on past it.
Yeah.
So, but there's different types of puzzles for different folks, like I always say, and I think that it's good that you showcased both of them, and I think both of them actually had very appealing answers. Where when I look at the answer, I go, yeah, of course that's the answer. If I'd solved that properly and submitted it, I'd be 99 to 100% right. Sure that I got it right.
Yeah.
So I think that's like kind of the most important thing, especially. I know you're not like limiting the solved submissions right now, like fully. But if you ever were to, it is good when you reach the end of the puzzle and you're like, okay, I'm 100% sure I'm right. Let me just click submit now.
Yeah. Yeah. And Stacy, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think they covered it. It was super fun. I enjoyed how this one had kind of multiple steps, and you kind of felt like you were making progress, and could confirm that progress. And especially the use of an anagram as a solve can be kind of dicey, because sometimes you've got you can have unlimited number of anagrams that do anagram, but it was nice that it felt right. Like you kind of got confirmation along the way that you were on the right track. Whereas if it had been something, a different kind of anagram, or the answers were different, you wouldn't have the certainty. So it was good that you kind of built in that gut check so that you knew that you
Yeah.
were doing it
Yeah.
correctly.
And I did realize that but first unscramble it might be another viable option, but I felt like it would be kind of binary between those two. I didn't want to leave you with 100 possibilities. I'm sure there were others that maybe had some logical basis, but um but yeah, I did intend maybe a little bit extra work, which might be a little mean, but it was just just kind of two options in my head. But again, there are so many things in these puzzles that I'm now realizing. And Sean, I mean, I'm sure this is something that you're seeing as well on the creator side, where so many things that people find that are unintended byproducts of just brains working at something in all of these, the multitude of ways that they work. So that's super fascinating as well, and definitely provided insight with our other initial hunt that was solved not long after this one, the nails in the kitchen hunt. So we may do a discussion on that to sort of see the other side, where there was some intentional misdirection and filler, red herring material, as we call it. But Mordecai, any other questions that you have? And I do want to, before we go, I will turn it over to you all if there's any other questions that you have for us. But Mordecai, anything else before we do that?
Nothing too major, but I do have a question. Was this something that kind of preoccupied your mind, like working during the day, or was it something that just kind of stayed with you a lot, or was it something you kind of dedicate some time to it and then not think about it for a while?
Stacy,
Both.
you're nodding,
Both,
but
for
yeah,
sure.
all right.
It's when you get stuck in your head, right? And you're just driving along, and then all of a sudden it's right back in your head, right? And that's kind of got the earwing quality about it too. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of good hunts out there. So sometimes, like, we'll be bouncing back and forth between a few hunts. But once you get a few of those pieces, like with this one, like we have the one-time pad code. Why is it not working?
Yeah.
It's hard not to obsess about just like getting it to the finish line and booking the win.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably pretty helpful doing it as a team too. I think that's, if I was on the other side, I would want to be doing this as a team. I think that's
Oh,
way
it's
more
great for
fun.
me. I woke up and Jeremy said, "Hey, I solved it this morning based on the clue." I go, "There was a clue this morning. I was sleeping."
A lot happened while you were
Yeah,
while you
apparently.
were catching up. Yeah.
It's good. Yeah, it's always good to have a teammate that's farther to the east than you are, just in case.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a small point that I will add, but we won't always make them sort of East Coast friendly. We are aware that not everyone is East Coast time frame. So that's a good point. Now, it looks like we might have lost Jeremy, but were there any questions that you all had
I've
for
got
us?
questions. If you're gonna give us time to ask questions,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, we'll answer what we can and want to. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, like how did the progression of the two puzzles kind of compare to what you were expecting? Did you have expectations? Did you like what were you? How did it compare?
Yeah, so for this one, I'd say that it tracked about I mean, I think this one had a more clear direction with the steps sort of. So it did kind of track what I anticipated in that I saw we had a couple early submissions for Marcia Giano and for Doris Kappelhoff. And so you know, I could tell that there was a point where those names started to fall for people, not necessarily all of them, or sort of as a group of three that would need to be used together. At a certain point, the outer edges, which, you know, kind of were intended to stand apart as kind of a separate element of the puzzle, I started seeing, you know, I think at one point someone mentioned that Cipher could be found in the bottom, and I was like, well, okay, if you kind of keep pulling on that thread, you'll probably get to where that is intended to get to. So I'd say that this one, yeah, definitely followed um, my expectations, or you know, sort of what I was anticipating. Um, I mean, you guys, honestly, you guys cracked it quicker than I maybe thought. I think you all were further along in terms of a cohesive. The bits and pieces were kind of all out there, but you all had, and I don't think I'm oversharing, but you all sort of sent me something, just sort of, you know, a little bit of like a, hey, this is where we're at. We think you know, we kind of think we're close. And that we were already anticipating dropping a clue. I don't know if it was intentional when you sent your, email to us, but it was right around the first of the month when we were planning to drop one. And, so that definitely was an insight where I said, okay, well, we're a lot closer to the finish line here than I even realized, just by kind of seeing all of the bits and pieces on the Discord and from solve submissions and all that sort of stuff. The recipe Nails in the Kitchen Hunt, I thought was going to be solved maybe a month before it was, because I had insight that was not publicly shared that the Pantone code had been cracked, but it was not sort of it was not then finished out in the way that it needed to be. So that took people, that took a little bit longer than I maybe anticipated. I thought that maybe when someone kind of realizes that they're all Pantone colors, uh, you know, theoretically you could then kind of crack it in a few minutes if you saw the right thing. But there was also so much else in that one that I think that was what led to that taking longer. People thinking, oh, well, I need to use this or I need to use that. So I'd say a little bit of both to answer your question. It sort of has been what I anticipated, and yet there's also been nuances to it that were not part of my expectations or what I anticipated.
Hmm. Yeah. How does it compare to what you're expecting for something like Americana?
I think it would be fair to say that if you, obviously, I mean, I'm not saying anything too revealing to say that there are other sorts of puzzles or mechanisms within Americana as a bigger hunt than would just be contained within the two smaller intro hunts. But I'd say that if you have familiarity with how these worked, that can certainly help you in elements of it. And I kind of anticipate that one progressing similarly, only of course it's a more expansive hunt. And so it, you know, it'll just take a little bit more time than, say, the word search. You know, I think before I'm going to be seeing, or, you know, we're going to be seeing on our end, actual like solve submissions and stuff like that. You know, we have had a few, but you know, I think that one is just going to take a little bit more time to sort of unravel the various elements of. But I anticipate that it'll progress similarly, just on a expanded timeline. Yeah.
What about
Do
that?
you sort of
Oh, go ahead. Sure.
do you sort of view Americana like almost like 9 puzzles in one, or do you view it as like one big puzzle?
I'll say more like 9 puzzles in one, but there are cohesive elements. I'll say that. Yeah. Yeah.
For the boots on the ground portion, do you have a way of knowing if someone has solved that part? And if so, will you let the community know, that portion's kind of out of play now, or do you have any plans for that?
Yes and yes. So, assuming that the person, it will not be of any value to the person who finds it unless they contact us, and we will reveal that when it is, because it's a one person will find thing. There are not multiples out there, so that will be revealed, assuming that the person would come forward, which they would have to if they wanted to realize the benefit of it. So yes and yes.
Yeah, that's awesome because you don't want to be out there looking,
Yeah.
not knowing if it's still
Yeah.
there, right? So,
Yeah.
do you expect the person that solves the boots on the ground portion to have a fairly specific location, or do you think it'll be kind of like a very broad, I need to make a big trip and spend time grid searching and that sort of thing? Do you have a sense of that?
I'd say that it gives me from what I've heard. I don't know if you guys are messing around with either of the John Collins Black or the Justin Posey hunt, but I've just been sort of following what they're saying about theirs, and I'd say it should track pretty similarly, where you would have a very specific area, but then yes, there would be some, I don't want to say grid searching because that maybe makes it sound like a bigger area than it would be, but you'd probably have to do a little bit of looking around in a somewhat honed in area. So that is kind of saying nothing, and but if you get the gist of what I'm saying, it'll lead you somewhere very specific, and you'll then need to do a little bit of looking around, is how I'll say that. Yeah.
That's totally
Yeah.
fair. Yeah, you mentioned those other two hunts. What is your guys' background in different puzzles and hunts that you've done, and what have you liked about the ones you've liked? What ones have you worked on? What do you not like?
Yeah, so my background was started as a casual, more observer of the fen hunt, but I was totally wrapped up in just like the world of treasure hunting from the time I learned about that. But and we're sort of casually watching and interested in these bigger hunts that have come out in the last 6-8 months as well, more as just kind of observers. And it's fascinating to kind of follow the discussions and see how they're playing out. I'd say we're less actively involved in them. I'm very much more into kind of puzzle hunts that are what I consider more to be what we've released thus far, where it's less kind of abstract. Not saying there isn't anything abstract involved in it, but less of sort of the poem, and then I say that, and yet there is a poem in Americana, so not entirely, but where it's a little bit more concrete and feels more like a game, a puzzle, a challenge in that aspect of it. And I'll let Mordecai speak for himself, but everyone, I will just tease that everyone's going to be introduced to a really fun Mordecai hunt really soon, which is going to look very different from what we've from what you've seen from us thus far. So you're going to get to know his devious ways shortly, which look different than mine. So I'm super excited for that because we just kind of wanted to let these fall, and that one is very much on the doorstep. So
Yeah, definitely excited to get that one out. And my history with the community has been kind of similar with nails, like kind of observing and I like following the psychology of people that like taking these challenges on. And I'm excited to kind of release my first one and see how the community takes it. So look for that very, very soon.
Yeah, I think I can't really think of anything that's similar to it. I mean, I know there's a lot of hunts out there that that I'm not aware of, but this one is it's cool. So I think probably this week, right?
Hopefully later this week.
Yeah,
We'll
maybe,
talk about how
like
we want to launch it.
end
Yeah.
of week, but I think we're it's going to be real soon, and then yeah,
So
exciting
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, Sean, Stacy, thank you so much for doing the hunt and joining us tonight to talk through how it went for you. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we
All right, well,
we look forward to seeing this team potentially working together. Are you guys? I don't want to. Maybe we'll leave that as a mystery. Whether the team will be working on stuff in the future together. But I certainly look forward to interacting with y'all more, and we hope that you had as good of an experience as we have with this particular hunt.
All right, well, that's going to do it for the Treasure Fix podcast. We will see you all next time.